Hi, grade 5. Today we're going to be reading Who Wrote the U.S. Constitution in your Literature Anthology textbook. This is on page 96. So I just wanted to begin with, I wanted to tell you all that the original colonies of the United States belonged to Great Britain. Now, many of you knew this in class and told me that you learned this in social studies. There were 13 original colonies of the United States. The Revolutionary War, which was also called the American Revolution, took place from 1775 to 1783. Patriots of these 13 colonies fought and obtained their freedom from the British, from Great Britain, during this war. The Articles of Confederation were created during this Revolutionary War. All right, this is when states were focused on working towards creating a union against a single enemy. Okay, these Articles of Confederation that were written served as the only plan at the time for the new country's federal government. What is a federal government? A central government. Okay, so not just for a single state, but a government for the whole country. Okay, this selection began in 1787. All right, we're on page 97 in your Literature Anthology textbook. In 1787, 4 years after the Revolutionary War ended, the United States was struggling to stay united. During the war, the states had joined together under the Articles of Confederation. The Articles set up a federal government for the defense of the Union of States, but allowed each individual state the power to govern itself. Soon after the war, the federal government's weaknesses became clear. Conflicts between states arose, but the federal government could do little to resolve them. The Articles of Confederation were not working. With a sense of urgency, state leaders gathered for a convention in Philadelphia to discuss what could be done to keep the nation together. All right, expository texts like this one have illustrations, okay, including paintings of events that took place. So here this is a painting of the men who wrote the Constitution. A new plan. Virginia Governor Edmund Randolph spoke first on Tuesday, May 27, 1787. Randolph brought up the problems with the Articles of Confederation. Many states argued over borders shared with other states. People had trouble conducting business across state lines. State governments had no money. Some states printed money, but the money was not backed up by gold or silver. Much of it was worthless. Randolph spoke about another serious problem: taxes. The cost of the Revolutionary War left the United States in debt, so they owed money to other people. The government owed money to wealthy U.S. citizens and to foreign countries such as France and the Netherlands. To raise money to pay the debt, the U.S. government asked each state to tax its residents. Not every state agreed to do so, but states such as Virginia and Massachusetts taxed their citizens. Taxes had to be paid in cash, and that was a problem for many people. Ordinary working people did not use much cash. They lived off what they owned and grew: their land, houses, tools, livestock, and crops. If they needed something, a new tool or a pair of boots, they traded for it, but they could not trade with the state to pay their taxes. The situation was especially bad for farmers. States began taking to court farmers who could not pay their taxes and other debts. The courts took away farmers' land and livestock. Some farmers were even thrown in prison. During the summer of 1786, hundreds of angry Massachusetts farmers formed a rebel force. One of the leaders was Daniel Shays, a Revolutionary War hero, politician, and farmer. From August 1786 to January 1789, the rebels stormed courthouses in Northampton, Worcester, and other Massachusetts towns. They forced the courts to close. Shays' rebellion shocked the country. With all these problems before them, what could the convention delegates do? All right, so what were the problems that the nation was facing at the time? We know there were border disagreements, okay? There were states that had no money, or they had money that was worthless. The states could not all agree to pay taxes to cover the debt, the money that they owed, all right? And in states that did charge taxes, many people could not pay for them. All right, here we have in the photo Daniel Shays and his fellow rebel leader, Job Shattuck. Why was Shays' rebellion important? In October 1786, the Confederation Congress decided to use federal troops to stop the rebels, but Congress could not convince state governments to help pay for the soldiers. Massachusetts leaders had to raise the money themselves. In January 1787, Shays and his rebels attacked an armory, a building used to store weapons. In Springfield, Massachusetts, troops stopped the raid and many rebels were arrested. In the spring of 1787, Massachusetts passed laws to help farmers in debt. The rebellion began to fade, but for many people, Shays' rebellion showed how weak the federal government was. For them, it proved that the Articles of Confederation were failing. All right, so it's important to know why Shays' rebellion was so important. All right, if we look at page 98, we can understand from this that this happened because the farmers were angry because they lost their land. All right, why did they lose their land and their livestock? So their animals, the animals they had on their farm. They were also thrown in prison over taxes that they could not pay. So they did not have the cash needed to pay the taxes. We can also look on page 99 at this note about Shays' rebellion. It says that the state of Massachusetts had to pay soldiers to stop the rebellion because the federal government could not get states to help pay. Shays' rebellion showed that the federal government and the Articles of Confederation were not effective. All right, we can understand that money was a big problem for people and for the government during this time. All right, page 100. Randolph presented a plan written by James Madison and other Virginia delegates. The Virginia plan created a stronger federal government, one that could protect the American people. Randolph explained that the plan created a national legislature. The legislature had two branches. Members of the first branch, the House of Representatives, would be elected by the people. House members would choose delegates to the second branch, the Senate. Together, the House and the Senate would elect the U.S. President and federal judges. Randolph spoke for more than 3 hours. At last, he sat down. The first real meeting of the convention had left the delegates with much to think about. The next day, May 30th, 41 delegates began going over the Virginia plan point by point. The Articles of Confederation had set up the Confederation Congress as the federal government, but the Articles also protected each state's freedom and independence. Under the Virginia plan, the federal government could overrule state governments. Delegates realized that the Virginia plan did not correct the Articles. It ignored them altogether. This idea stopped several delegates in their tracks. They thought they were at the convention to revise and strengthen the Articles of Confederation, so the existing articles. They did not expect a new plan that threw out the articles. Did they dare change the entire system of government? All right, so the new plan that was presented at the convention was, it was presented by Madison, all right, and it meant to solve the problem of the federal government being too weak. All right, how would the Virginia plan change the government? It would make the federal government stronger, and therefore it would protect the American people and their rights. Separation of powers. On May 31st, 1787, convention delegates voted to create a stronger national government. They decided that it should consist of three parts: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. The legislative part, called Congress, would make the laws. The president would be the head of the executive part. He would carry out the laws. The national court system was the judicial part. It would decide the meaning of the laws and if they were being obeyed. With three parts or branches, power would be shared. No one branch would have more control of the federal government than the other two. Discussion swung to the one vote for one state system described in the Articles of Confederation. In 1787, a state's importance was measured by its number of citizens. For example, Georgia had a lot of land, but it was still considered small because of its low population. The three biggest states, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts, held nearly half the nation's population. But under the Articles, each state had only one vote, no matter its size or population. Tiny Rhode Island's voice in Congress carried as much weight as mighty Massachusetts. This is called equal representation. All right, so Rhode Island is very small in size and population compared to Massachusetts, but they both had the same, they both had one vote. Okay, so this is what they called equal representation, that no matter how big the state is, there was one vote. The Virginia plan changed that. Under the plan, the House of Representatives would be elected by the people, and the number of representatives would be based on a state's population. So this changed. All right, so Massachusetts, which was a larger state with more people, a larger population, Massachusetts would have more votes than, say, for example, Rhode Island or another small state. Okay, so it would be based on the number of members in the Senate. The number of members in the Senate would also depend on population. This is known as proportional representation. Proportional means an amount determined by size. Immediately, the convention broke into two camps, big states versus small states. The small states fought against the Virginia plan. With proportional representation, they felt they would not have as strong a voice in the federal government. All right, so this part here, this section tells us how the delegates decided to divide the national government into the legislative, the executive, and the judicial parts. And it also told us how no one branch would have more power than the other two. Okay, here it talks about proportional representation, which was proposed in the new plan, the Virginia plan. It talks about how it created a problem. Right? Why was this a problem? It was a problem for the smaller states, right, with the smaller populations. So if the number of representatives became based on the state's population, then small states would not have a strong voice in government. States had other differences beyond size. Southerners grew tobacco, sugar, and rice on large farms called plantations. Many people in the middle of the country, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and New York, were merchants. They ran businesses and stores. People in Massachusetts and Connecticut were shipbuilders and fishers. Slavery was another big issue dividing the states. Southern plantation owners used African slaves to work the plantations. Slaves were treated as property. Slavery was against the law in most northern states. Some northerners wanted to make slavery illegal in every state, but southern states fiercely defended their right to own slaves. At the 1787 convention, slavery became part of the debate over proportional representation. Should slaves be counted as part of a state's population? Thousands of slaves lived in states such as Georgia and South Carolina. Counting slaves would give southern states more representatives in the federal government. Northern delegates felt this was unfair. Southern states did not treat slaves like people in any other case. So why should they be allowed to use the slave population to gain more representation? Day after day, the delegates chewed over parts of the representation issue. The room grew hot. The hours grew long. The Virginians had taken control of the convention. Their delegates were good writers and speakers, but Virginia was not the entire nation. The small states needed to be heard. William Paterson, a New Jersey lawyer, presented the New Jersey Plan. It was the small states' answer to the Virginia Plan. Under the New Jersey Plan, Congress would have only one house. It would not have a House of Representatives and a Senate. The federal government would not have a president, and there would be no federal courts except the Supreme Court. The New Jersey Plan proposed that all states, no matter how big or small, would have the same number of representatives. Most important, Paterson's plan did not create a new Constitution. The plan was designed to become additional amendments or formal changes to the Articles of Confederation. On June 19, James Madison jumped to his feet to speak first. He wanted to convince the delegates to vote for the Virginia plan. He argued against the New Jersey plan point by point. When he was finished, the delegates voted. 7 states chose the Virginia plan. 3 states voted for the New Jersey plan. Maryland was divided and did not cast a vote. The big states had won. For the next several days, members argued. 2 houses in Congress or 1? The same issues were brought up but never solved. Tempers flared. The small states felt the big states were pushing them around again. So let's read quickly about James Madison. Who was he? He was a key player at the convention even before the meeting began. He had read about the governments of modern and ancient civilizations. From his studies, he came up with 2 theories. The first was that a national government could come from the people and not the states. The second was that power should be divided so that no one person or group controlled the government. While waiting for the rest of the members to arrive, the Virginia delegates met each morning at Mrs. House's boarding house. Using James Madison's theories, the group hammered out the Virginia plan. All right, so why was this idea of representation in the government such a problem? We know that representation was supposed to be based on state population, and the southern states had slaves. All right, so it would give those states more of an advantage. They would have more representation in the federal government than the northern states would have because of all of these slaves that would be counted as part of the population. All right, and why did all of these state differences, this is at the bottom of page 103, why did state differences lead to a debate about state representation? All right, so how is this directly related to how the states are different? The Virginia plan proposed that representation would be based on population, which benefited the larger states. All right, the small states preferred the New Jersey plan, which proposed that all states have the same number of representatives. The Great Compromise. July 2nd, 1787 was a Monday. By the time the delegates met in the morning, the East Room was already hot. Once again, delegates voted on whether states should have equal representation in the Senate. 5 states said yes, 5 said no, and Georgia was divided. A tie. Everyone was discouraged. Benjamin Franklin understood that each state had to give up something in order for everyone to gain. He suggested a compromise. So this is the meaning of a compromise. All right. Here the phrase is written for you. This is used as a context clue. All right. The word compromise here is preceded by give up something in order for everyone to gain. All right. This means that a compromise is a situation in which each party or each group of people in this case gives up something in order to get something that they want. All right, so they can't each have everything, so they are coming to an agreement. They are giving up something to get what they really want. The delegates could choose parts from the Virginia and New Jersey plans that would please both the big and small states. The delegates took off the next 2 days for Independence Day. On July 4th, bells rang and guns fired salutes. People celebrated the country's freedom from the British rule. Few knew that the entire convention was on the brink of failure. When the members met again on July 5th, they took up the same argument. Then Connecticut's Roger Sherman came up with a solution. He pointed out that the big states had already won proportional representation in the lower house. He proposed that each state, no matter what size, would send 2 delegates to the upper house. The members debated Sherman's proposal for 11 days. On July 16th, they voted again. The Connecticut Compromise passed 5 votes to 4. This vote, also known as the Great Compromise, became a turning point in the convention. Delegates from big states and small realized that they needed to think about the greater good of the nation. Almost as a sign that the right decision had been made, Philadelphia's heat wave broke. Okay, so in this section, a problem is presented, and that is that the delegates could not come to an agreement on representation in the upper house. So they came to a compromise. What is the solution? The delegates agreed to compromise, and they created a plan that satisfied everyone. All right, the states would have proportional representation in the lower house, and they would have 2 delegates each in the upper house. So this is the conclusion they reached, the solution they reached, and this was the compromise. Convention members voted over and over. They sometimes voted again on issues they had already settled. Through it all, George Washington sat in the high-backed chair and listened. Most members believed that Washington would be the perfect first president. He had already proved to be a strong leader, and people liked him. But who would be president after Washington? The delegates knew they had to be careful about the way future presidents would be elected. On July 26, the convention took a 10-day break. Delegates who lived close by went home. Others headed for cooler air in the mountains. Washington visited Valley Forge, a rural area northwest of Philadelphia. During the Revolutionary War, Washington and his troops had camped at Valley Forge. Freezing and hungry, they spent the winter of 1777 and 1778 in tiny log huts. The old camp was in ruins when Washington visited it that July. Not everyone went on vacation. 5 delegates remained in Philadelphia. John Rutledge, Nathaniel Gorham, Oliver Ellsworth, Edmund Randolph, and James Wilson made up the Committee of Detail. They had the important job of copying down the resolutions that had been decided so far. It was hard work, but they finished a rough outline of a document. The document was a new plan for the government, a constitution. The draft was printed and ready to be handed out when the convention met again. All right, so here on page 107, this is the document, the first draft of the U.S. Constitution. It's written, you can see, in handwriting that has lines through it, all right? So whoever was writing this is just a draft, and things were taken out and added. This is the first draft ever of the Constitution. Of and for the people. On Monday, August 6th, delegates received their copies of the Constitution, 7 freshly inked pages. Starting the next day and all through hot, steamy August, they debated every sentence. The Constitution had 23 articles. Each article was divided into sections. The delegates needed to speed up the process of discussing and voting on all the articles. To achieve this, many items were given to committees to settle. The Committee of Postponed Parts had the most issues to work out. It had to decide where the new government would be located and how Congress would charge taxes. But the executive branch was its most pressing problem. The Committee of Postponed Parts decided the President of the United States would serve a term of 4 years and could be reelected. He must be a U.S. citizen and at least 35 years old. The committee added the office of vice president. The vice president would lead the Senate and take over if the president died or if he had to leave office. The members made sure the president and the Congress had the power to get things done, but each branch would not have too much power over the other. A huge question remained. How would the country choose the president? Most delegates felt the president should be selected by the Congress or state legislators. Back in June, James Wilson said the people should pick the president. No one had liked that idea. But members of the committee changed their minds. They agreed that Wilson's plan was a good one after all. Wilson's plan included what came to be called the Electoral College. The country would be divided into areas or districts. People from each district would choose an elector. Those electors would decide who would be president. The Committee of Style revised the final draft of the Constitution. Governor Morris wrote the preamble with its stirring words, "We, the people of the United States." The U.S. Constitution became a document of and for the people. All right, so what was the role of these committees? We see that there were 23 articles in the Constitution, and each article had sections. So since the delegates were going to debate every sentence, it was going to take a lot of time to get through all of it. So items were divided, and they were decided, they were assigned to committees who would resolve these so that it wouldn't take as much time. Okay, there were two possible ways of choosing the president. One was to let the Congress or state legislators choose the president, and the second was for the people to choose. This was James Wilson's plan, and this is the plan that they chose in the end. They agreed it was a good plan and they changed their mind. Sorry, not sure what happened. Okay, we're now on page 110. The final version was presented to the convention on September 12th. George Mason felt that there should be a Bill of Rights, a list of important rights guaranteed to citizens. Elbridge Gerry agreed, but the other members did not. They believed people's rights were already protected by state constitutions. On Monday, September 17th, 42 delegates were present. William Jackson, the convention secretary, read aloud the final version of the Constitution. Benjamin Franklin gave a speech to James Wilson to read for him. Franklin did not like parts of the Constitution, but even with its faults, he doubted anyone could create a better system of government. He urged each man present to sign the Constitution. George Washington signed first. Then, state by state, 39 delegates signed their names. Secretary Jackson witnessed their signatures. 3 men refused to sign. Edmund Randolph, George Mason, and Elbridge Gerry would not sign without a Bill of Rights. When the Constitution was signed, Franklin pointed to the half-sun carved on the back of Washington's chair. He said he could never tell if the sun was rising or setting, but now he knew that it was a rising sun. That evening, the delegates held a farewell dinner at the city tavern. They had come to Philadelphia with different ideas and interests. During the summer, they learned to work together. The result was the U.S. Constitution. All right, here is the final copy of the U.S. Constitution, the original Constitution, and it is kept in the National Archives building in Washington, D.C. today for people to see. All right, so we can understand from this text just how much thinking and how much time it took in order to write the Constitution, in order to come to agreements and solutions that everyone was happy with. Good problem solvers must discuss issues and listen to proposed solutions before they can make a decision that will work for everyone, and this is what happened in the case of the U.S. Constitution.